Very good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar on improving business IT alignment by implementing strong relationship management. This webinar will be led by Fred Van Leeuwen. Before we start, I'd like to take you through a few housekeeping rules that will be of benefit to you. We will be emailing you the slides and the recording of this webinar in about a week after today. Um, Please feel free to get in touch with us before that if you need anything. Also, at the end of the webinar, there will be a post-webinar survey that will pop up. Please do take the time to complete it for us for your feedback. During the webinar, if you have any questions that might occur to you, please type them into the questions box, and we will allocate time at the end of the webinar for the speaker to address your questions. Moving on, I would like to take you through a short introduction about your speaker today. You might have already read about him in the description while you signed up for the webinar. But just to quickly introduce Fred, Fred is an international authority in the field, a subject matter expert who has been consulting with clients for practical IT improvement on a daily basis. He has also been an author, a speaker for conferences and training courses alike. So over to you, Fred. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you. Well, in this brief session, we will see what is IT relationship management and how it will work for your IT department, but also how in practice it will be able to deliver quick wins, improving both the value you can provide to the business as also the image of the IT department. So in other words, what the business thinks of you. In order to do so, first we look at, do we really need to do that? So why do we need IT relationship management? Secondly, what are the goals that we are trying to achieve, especially if we implement the role of a relationship manager? What are the KPIs for such a role? Then how to fit the activity in your company's rules of the game, in other words, the IT governance. Then we look at the good and bad practices, actually the do's and don'ts. And then how to fit the role in the organizational structure. And also we'll have a few words about the competencies that are required to play the role properly. So why do we need relationship management in the IT department? In practice, we see that IT professionals, they are dedicated to do a good job. So it's depicted here on the left side in the diagram. We are really focusing on content of things and trying to do a very good professional job. And yet, all too often, we hear the business complain, I don't get what I really wanted. If I get it late, and it's all too costly. So in other words, we are working very hard, but the image that we get back often is not quite fair. It's not in line with the hard work. And the reason is that our engineering is usually a lot smarter than the way we communicate with the business. So what IT can or cannot do may be very evident to us as professionals, but it's surely not always as clear to our colleagues in the business. So we need to communicate much better about that. Even when we work on internal process improvement, such as implementing ITIL or project management practices, we are usually, as an IT professional, investing a lot of energy in the content. Implementing best practice processes, which the user often perceives as increased bureaucracy rather than improved service. Now, there is a way to achieve happy users much more quickly, even if the process quality is not perfect yet. Simply by making sure to really connect at a human level. So it's represented in this picture, the IT organization as a castle, which is not all too open to its clients, but now we are lowering the bridge. So in fact, what we try to do is to have this IT department, which has a huge cognitive intelligence, to also develop the emotional intelligence a little bit more. And implementing the relationship management role will help us do that. For the relationship manager, there are certain KPIs to achieve. The main thing is the relationship manager should have a clear contribution to improving the added value that IT provides to the business. The real added value, the way we deliver the service, as well as the way it's being perceived by the user departments. So, in other words, also ensure what is the image of the IT department to improve that. In addition, depending on the internal role of our IT department, and we come back to that in a minute when we talk about IT governance, it could also be that there are some commercial KPIs that we want the relationship manager to secure a certain amount of the internal business, at minimum to simply cover the costs of the IT department. But maybe if we act in a more commercial way internally, maybe also there is an issue about revenue and margin. Secondly, also, we have a certain portfolio of products and services, and some of them might be utilized very well, where others might be quite unknown to the business and underutilized. So in that situation, a good objective for the relationship manager is to make sure, like any normal commercial contact person would do, is to make sure that the whole service portfolio is well known and to spot opportunities in the user organization to apply such services. The third thing is also to have a certain internal market position, and again, that depends very heavily on the internal rules of the game or the IT governance as we apply it. So let's have a look at this IT governance. What this shows is the prototype organizations as they were developed by Henry Mintzberg many decades ago. It shows the various components of any normal business organization. And in fact, what we see that the prototype organization on the right, we see 5 different types. And depending on the type, the diagram on the left side would change slightly. So you have a very simple structure, would be the starting business, in which case you don't have a very complicated levels of management. The other one is the machine bureaucracy, where the technostructure shown on the left side in the diagram will actually be able to kind of program the organization. In other words, the operational core and the middle management is supposed to follow very strict procedures which have been written down by the technostructure. This typically is the case still today in several organizations in the public sector, where bureaucracy is a good thing because it allows us to secure that similar cases are treated at a similar way. But in the business world, increasingly we see that where in the past the business organizations were led in a very top-down fashion, most of our business managers today are empowered to assume more bottom line responsibility. That way we get into prototype 3 or 4, either the professional bureaucracy, which has much more freedom, much more empowerment within the business, as well as the divisional structure, which often we see in the form of a big corporation working in several business units. I don't mention the autocracy. It's a specific type of organization you would, for instance, see in advertisement bureaus and stuff like that. It's much less organized. It's much more creative. But mainly, our IT departments will be operating either in number 2 or number 3 or number 4, if it's a bigger company. Now we see in practice that there's often a bit of a conflict between the way that IT department assumes their role and the business governance. Because as I said earlier, in many cases, the business managers these days, they are empowered to assume their own responsibility. And too often they feel that the attitude of the IT department is lagging a bit behind, in the sense that IT is trying to push them in a certain direction, to tell them what they can or cannot have, try to follow an architecture or certain standards and rules which have not properly been agreed with the business. And that means that there starts to be friction between the business governance and the IT governance. And so then there is a need to clarify the rules of the game as a prerequisite for providing proper service and to develop a better relationship. So whatever the business governance you work in, first of all, we need to make sure that we know the business very well and we apply the IT service in such a way that we provide real value to the business, as well as ensure a positive image of the IT department and make sure that we work in a way that is aligned to the business. Now, if looking in a little bit more detail, there are various ways to organize this as an internal market. One way, maybe the traditional way, is the IT department has an internal monopoly. In other words, business departments have no way, no authority to go outside the company to buy external IT services just on their own. If there is a case they think they need it, they are obliged to go through the IT department as a rule. So this is one scenario, it's one option, and this is what used to be the situation for decades. But the world is changing, it's more open, and precisely because the business departments have more empowerment, in several situations they get more rights to go outside. So the second option, the business department can go outside and find their own consultants or maybe contract external IT services, as long as they make sure that the internal IT department is put in a position to bring out a proposal as well. And dependent on the exact ruling, it can be that they really have to explain to their senior managers if the IT department really cannot offer the service for a reasonable price and a good quality, then they are allowed to go outside. Of course, there are restrictions because somehow the systems that get acquired that way have to be a part of the infrastructure. And quite often you need to be interfacing to other existing applications, maybe to a legacy system. And so the IT department will be involved sooner or later anyway to do the system management or to make sure that the integration is done properly, etc. So even with option 2, there are of course limitations to what a business department can be allowed to do. The third option is even more free. Now the business department can choose either or not to ask the IT department for an offer. So in this situation, the business department can go outside or inside, and there is a real competitive market. The issue for the IT department in that situation, of course, is that they should, as the other side of the medal of this solution, also have the right to sell its services on the external market in order to keep things in balance, because without it, they would be left to the will of the business. And it's very difficult to run a department with a given number of employees and a budget if these two sides of the coin are not there. The advantage for the business in that case is that because IT department will be competing externally also, they are obliged to compete in an open market, and that way they demonstrate that they do have a healthy quality cost ratio. Of course, IT departments in a commercial business can do so, but if it is the public sector, then there are limitations, because from the public sector you cannot do this without creating unfair competition on the external market. But for all commercial companies, this is a real option. So let's have a look at what are the do's and don'ts in establishing the relationship management. Well, first of all, what you don't want is to have a dedicated relationship manager as a job title, as a full-time job, or to have a dedicated relationship management department. The main reason being that if you do it that way, it's a hidden signal to the rest of the IT department, the other professionals. We need to be client-oriented, and this particular department is going to take care of it. In other words, you can remain doing your job the way you always did it. So that's not a very good signal. The second reason is that we are dealing with a service. We are not selling products, we are selling a service. And so it's a professional service. And this makes it rather difficult to have a specialized salesperson. It would even be suspicious in the eyes of the business. And so it's much better to make sure that relationship management is implemented as a role in the IT department, not as a job title. Another thing we sometimes see in practice is we have a relationship manager without teeth. In other words, it's just someone in the IT department for whom you had no other purpose. And now he gets this beautiful role. But of course, people, they sense this. And both the clients as well as your internal IT professionals who have to work with this person, they feel there is no big need to take him serious, and therefore this person will not have any authority to make things happen. Instead of that, what we need to ensure preferably is to make sure that the relationship manager is at least equal in status to any member of the IT management team. Preferably, maybe it is a member of the management team, and then these members, they assume the relationship management as a role. And we will see later in the presentation how you can actually implement that in your existing organizational structure. The other aspect of having teeth means that the internal organization really has to take the relationship manager very serious, because the relationship manager internally really is the ambassador of your client. And so there must be a culture where anybody being responsible for the service provision will take the relationship manager really serious. The other thing we don't want to see is that the relationship manager will become the shop window for all communications. Sometimes that mistake is being made, and then very quickly what you see is that the relationship manager will become a bottleneck in the communications. Also, there is a lot of routine communications going on, again, because we are not selling products, we are actually in the service business. So every interaction in the service usually means interacting with the customers. And so it's useless, it doesn't add value for the relationship manager to be in between in every single communication. This would be a big mistake if you do it that way. Instead of that, we see that the relationship manager acts in a certain mode of operation, and we will see there are 4 different in a few minutes. And which mode of operation the relationship manager will select in a given situation depends on the situation. The last mistake that can be made in practice is that we start to go too far in our client orientation. And sometimes you hear this being said by an IT director or an IT manager to reflect the fact that the client is always right, in other words. Now, I can imagine if you're trying to make the transition from a very internally focused, maybe even introvert IT organization to a more customer-oriented organization, that you might sometimes use this phrase. But in reality, of course, what we need to see is that any transaction, any business transaction, also between the IT department and the business people, need to be beneficial to both sides, reasonable. And so that means that we can say the client is the king, but we can also assume that he should behave like a king. So before we start to have a look at the different modes of operation, the relationship manager, we see him on the left side in the IT organization. The complicated situation that he is actually operating in is represented by the fact we have many different IT professionals and IT managers, of which you see a certain number on the left side. And there is a whole range, a whole matrix of interconnections with the business organization on the right side. Again, a whole variety of different roles, people and managers there. The way we work with the business and the way we communicate, it's very good practice to think about what is the actual deliverable that we are working to. So that's why we see the outputs in the middle. And basically there are 2 categories of outputs. Where it says organizing things, it kind of is the plan, the plan portfolio of IT services. These days it's quite common to make a distinction between three different categories. It's plan, build, and run. And the plan side is on the upper level there. It's organizing things, including organizing IT strategy, agreeing about IT architecture, agreeing the service portfolio and the KPIs of services across the border with the business and things like that. On the bottom where it says doing things, we see the outputs resulting from interactions in the build and in the run. So this is about projects and about running system management, running the help desk and things like that. Now, going back to the fact that we do not want the relationship manager to be the shop window and thereby become the bottleneck in the communications, depending on the level of the interaction, he will choose the right mode of operation. And there are four. The first one is that the relationship manager actually does the communication with the client. This would be the case, for instance, when discussing the yearly budget plan. And a very good way to do that in good alignment with the business is to have the relationship manager do this discussion, conduct this conversation with their internal client at the moment that this business client have to make their own business plan. And of course, the IT department have to make a business plan. You could see it in other words also. You could say that this way the relationship manager actually is making an account plan, a commercial account plan, which should reflect both the requirement of the business in the coming years, as well as the way that IT organization can anticipate and work with this. So here the mode of operation is the relationship manager actually does the communication clear. Second possibility is that the relationship manager is attending the conversation, but actually not taking a big part in it. Is mainly present to guard and to manage the communication process. And a good example could be the moment where we start to initiate a big new project for the business. Then by that time we have appointed a project manager, and the project manager of course has to be in the lead. But at the same time, it's an essential moment. It's a moment of truth in the development of the image of the IT department with that particular user. And so the relationship manager has a role to play in that process. But the role he plays is he lets the project manager do the main content of the communication, but he makes sure the communication process is managed in the proper way. The third way could be is contracting. So for instance, the moment we start to negotiate or renegotiate a service level agreement with this particular user, that typically would be a role for the relationship manager to have a very active involvement. And the fourth and least involved way actually is to look after the performance of all the interactions between the IT organization and the business organization. That is to say, that part for which this relationship manager has the responsibility. And the way to implement it is that the relationship manager should receive regular reporting on all the services that the IT department is providing to this particular customer, be it the status of projects that are being developed for this customer, down to the incidents that the help desk is working on. And normally, this would mean that this reporting goes in a periodic way, so with hindsight. So he can secure afterwards, he can see the actual performance has been so and so. However, we want to become proactive as well. So if we want to improve the image of the IT department, one thing we need to think about is how to be more proactive if serious problems are evolving, and to come into action before these problems become obvious to the business. That means that any person within the IT organization dealing with such a situation needs to be aware of potential problems that might be coming in the future, either in a project or a very serious incident as a result of which the business will suffer. And then they really need to interact with the relationship manager immediately. So instead of waiting for the monthly report, clearly the relationship manager needs to be made aware so that he can make the decision how to become involved in this serious situation. Now, the next question is, how do we organize this in any given IT organizational structure? So once more on the left, you see our simplified IT organization. In this case, we have a management team consisting of 5 people. It's the CIO or IT director. We have 3 line organizations. One is for applications, managing applications. One is for infrastructure, both the engineering and the preparation and the acquiring of it. And then we have a manager of IT operations. It's quite a common way to operate for many IT departments. The 5th person is manager of a staff office, is dealing with the CIO office, maybe dealing with security, IT strategy, architecture, etc. In a very similar way, on the right side, we see the business organization, and this clearly is a divisional structure because we see the business units. It's a diverse corporation dealing with 3 different business units, and in addition also having a number of staff departments, including finance, HRM, and facilities. Now, the way this would work in practice is, take the example of the manager IT applications, number 3. The number 3 relation goes to HRM and facilities on the right side, which means that this particular manager has 2 different roles. One role as a hierarchical manager is responsible for business applications for all the business departments. At the same time as the relationship manager role, he has the relationship responsibility for the HRM department and the facilities department. And so you can see that each of the members of the IT management team assume a second responsibility in addition to their primary task, to take up the responsibility for a relationship with some part on the right side. So what it means is that if, assuming the same case, the manager IT applications is dealing with a problem in HRM, and HRM has a problem with operations. Now, the manager of IT apps will talk to his colleague of IT operations, and the IT operations will actually have to act and improve if necessary, because in this case, the manager apps is the internal ambassador of the client, in this case, the HRM department. So it's kind of a playing roles where, depending on the situation, the various colleagues within the IT management team have a mutual responsibility, both for content, for their service, but also for the client relationship. And they have to work together to make it all happen. So, coming to the conclusions, if we implement relationship management from the IT departments, there are different ways to do it, but clearly there are do's and don'ts. And if we do it well, we can expect an immediate positive impact. Because even when our provision of service is not perfect, paying attention to the relation and keeping contact on the human level will immediately improve the perception of the business, the image of the IT department. Internally, it's quite important that we do not only implement this relationship management role, but we make sure that all the other people in the IT department, the professionals, they are actually seeing that this is the ambassador of the client, and becoming client-oriented means that they really have to take this role very serious and react on any problems that arise. So the whole IT organization needs to be committed. That is very clear. The last point is a little bit about the competencies that you need. It's obvious that such a person can only operate properly if they have really good, if not excellent, communication skills, because they need to operate in between a potential dense area between the business and IT. And there's lots of risks and problems that can occur on that interface. So the relationship manager needs the skill to be able to make a real impact without too much formal authority, certainly to the business department. The other thing is that it does need a certain amount of content knowledge as well. Both preferably, take the example we used previously, this manager of applications dealing with the relationship with HRM, it would be really great if this person at least has affinity with the specialism of HRM, and even better if this person knows a little bit about the business process going on in that part. So that's the kind of business knowledge. The other side, of course, they also need a reasonable amount of knowledge about IT, not necessarily technically, but certainly about how the IT department is being run and what is the kind of IT services that are being provided. So if you currently have no relationship management in your IT departments, I would recommend to you give it a good try. And you will see that clearly it can work very quickly and very well for you. On the other hand, if you did implement relationship management already, maybe now by this session you have seen why it is not working very well, because maybe you have not looked at the do's and don'ts in a sufficient manner. If you have, maybe you have an early implementation trying to make it work, and you see that there are now ways that you can improve it. And you will see if you make that kind of improvements, very quickly you will notice that your business organization tends to be more positive. So try to make it work. Now, having come at this point, the session is open to taking questions. So if you have any questions, you can be free to ask them, and we can have a little discussion about them. Okay, well, one question is how much time is this actually going to take, and how, if we have this relationship management role and we have to take care, in addition to our normal responsibilities as a member of the IT management team, how much time should we engage? Should we pay regular visits to our clients, and how should that work? Well, a very good way to approach this is to make a distinction, as any normal commercial organization would do, is to make different categories of clients. For instance, you can say we have category A clients, category B, category C, and dependent on which category the client is in, we will budget for an amount of time to spend with that client and have regular meetings. You might say that for the category A client, you run monthly meetings and you reserve 8 hours for it, including preparation, making minutes, and sorting out things that come out of the meeting. For the category B client, you could say, well, maybe this is 6 hours in 6 weeks. And for the category C clients, maybe you budget 4 hours in 8 weeks, as an example. So clearly, if you want to do this role, then of course you have to make sure that you budget the time to do it well, and this is one approach to do it. Maybe any further questions? No. It seems you have no questions. Okay, well, in that case, as promised, you will be able to get access to the presentation through the link that will be sent to you in the very near future. And then, should further questions arise, there is always the possibility to come back on that, or you have a look at the catalog, and or you go to the internet and you will actually be able to find a lot of material on this issue. Thank you very much for attending, and hopefully till next time.